things like that. So you create this prayer arrow, and you attach that list of all those things that would be your blocks to creating your dream, manifesting that dream into tangible form in your life, and you burn it. And I won't go into the story in the book, but it was a very funny incident of how I struggled with that. Then you take your life prayer arrow, which has a list of 10 things that you will do in order to create your active power in the world. You know, I worked with a man who wanted to be a teacher, and so he needed to do things like go back to school, take some courses in child development. So those would be acts that he would add onto his list of 10 things he would do, tangible acts to create his dream into form. And then you plant that arrow, that life prayer arrow, in the earth so that the sun and the moon and the wind and the rain and the earth and the stars can carry your prayers.
That's wonderful.
It's very beautiful.
It's very beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So in your practice, it sounds like you began to apply some of those shamanistic rituals into your, probably if you were trained traditionally, into your traditional practice. And I'm wondering how that shift happened for you.
I do quite a bit of what I've been taught, because I think that shamanism in many ways is really the psychology of the sacred. And so there are two trails that kind of dovetail for me and become very interwoven and related. And I don't even know anymore where one takes off and the other begins. But I would say that I use a lot of my traditional skills that I've been taught, but I do it from a position of sacredness. And I think I get different results from that position.
Okay. And what's your sense, I mean, do you feel like it's because you're tapping into the individual's personal sense of power differently than maybe traditional psychology has taught us to do?
Well, I think when you begin to weave shamanism in it, really shamanism is doing what a lot of therapists do anyway, naturally. Like, let's take Milton Erickson. You know, I remember a story where he had this couple that came to him. He was on vacation. They begged to come to him. He said, no, I'm on vacation. They begged. He finally said, okay, come. And he said to the woman, you go to the mountains and go on a retreat for a day. And he said to the man, you go to the desert and go on a retreat for the day. And they came, at the end of the day, they came back and they said to him, the woman said, I hated it. It was rigorous. I don't know why I did it. It was no fun. The man came back and he said, it was glorious. I saw this plant. I saw this. I saw that. It was magnificent. And so he said, great. Now, to the woman, you go to the desert, and to the man, you go to the mountains and come back in a day. And they came back, and the woman said, I hated it. It was hot. It was dusty. I don't know why you had me do this for. This isn't working. And the man said, I think I saw God up on the mountain. The trees were so beautiful, you know what I mean? And he said, that's it, you're done, and sent him home. And the woman at first was outraged, but they realized on the airplane, on the way home, that really he had given them an experience, a mirror, reflected back to them who they were and who they weren't. And they were like oil and water. No wonder their marriage wasn't working. They weren't even in the same book, much less on the same page. They viewed life very, very differently. But he didn't say to them, you know, you view life very differently, which they probably would have said, yeah, what's next? Instead, he gave them an experience to teach them that they viewed life differently. And I think that's where shamanism comes in. When you go and see someone who's studied and trained, much as therapists do, they see that person with a capital S. And a shaman will see who you're meant to be, your potential, and they'll also see the obstacles that you're struggling with. Into the gap of who you're meant to be and the obstacles, they'll pour intent, love, energy into that constellation of the universe that is within you. And then you can use that energy for healing.
That is really, really fascinating. So in your own, it sounds like there was a parallel process, because as you began to use that energy for your own healing, it began to leak into your work in some ways. I mean, it's almost like you cannot have that sort of internal transformative experience without it showing up.
I think that's true.
In what you do with others.
Yeah. And as my own life changed, I knew it was possible for healing and change and growth. And I became more compassionate and softer, and in some ways I actually became harder because I knew people could do it if, I knew it was available. I knew that it was, choosing. We do have dominion. One time a friend said to me after I'd left the relationship with my ex-husband, and I said, oh God, I hope I don't pick another bad relationship. And he said, Jennifer, it's not a matter of hope. It's a matter of creation.
That's so true.
And I went, oh my gosh, it is.
Yes, it is.
It's about paying attention, looking at the patterns, standing in my truth, testing the relationship. If I have questions, taking it to people that I trust. It really is a matter of creation, and that's for all of us. We have dominion over our lives in so many ways. I understand that it's like the healing process. We're not in charge of everything. We plant the seeds, we water it, we sow the ground, and then it blooms as it will, and the colors are what they are. But if we don't take dominion or control over planting it and sowing it and doing the footwork, then we aren't going to have the healing.
Yeah, we need to be, I think that's a message that comes through very clearly in your book, which is that we are part of this process. It's not as though I would go to see a shamanic healer and you would like wave your wand and suddenly I'm better. That it really involves showing up and participating in the process.
And I think that is what my teacher is so very good at, and I hope she's taught me. She holds up the mirror. And then you either look in the mirror and you say yuck because it doesn't look pretty and you clean it up, or you go on doing it the same way.
Now you said at this point your practice is people coming in on an as-needed basis.
Yes, it is.
Okay. How was that transition for your clients? Were they...
Oh, it was smooth for some and bumpy for others, and it's worked out very well now, and it seems to be empowering actually. It's worked out very well. I remember what we were talking about earlier, the mirrors that teachers hold up. I remember the first time I went to see Lynn, and when she looked at me, and this is one of the stories that's in the book, and she saw that I was such an eternal child, and she said to me, oh, Jennifer, have you done any inner child work? And the therapist in me sat up tall, and I went into great detail about this was 8 years ago when inner child work was so popular.
Oh, yeah.
And I talked about what I knew and what I did with clients and how I worked with myself, and great length. And she said nothing, very quietly listened until I was done. And then she looked at me, and because she could see, as we were talking about earlier, so clearly my difficulties, really, my life was in very much disarray. She knew I was not living the life of a powerful woman. She said, well, really? She said, I think your inner child's spoiled.
That's right.
I think she's running your life.
That's a wonderful story, yes.
Yeah, and I was so indignant, and I argued with her, and she waited until she didn't say anything. She just stayed centered in her own realm. And when I was done arguing with her, we sat in an uncomfortable silence, and then she said to me, we all have a destitute child within us longing to be healed. If you will make a pillow for her and comfort her, that will help heal her. And so she saw, I went to her that first visit, and I was hoping she'd be able to heal me. I didn't want to have to do that footwork myself. But just in that little example, you can see how she mirrored back to me who I was and who I wasn't. And then I left, and as I was driving home, I burst out laughing, and I realized I did have a spoiled child, and she was running my life. I nursed old resentments and held on to grudges, and I was impulsive, and that part of me really was, I didn't have an inner chief, an inner authority that could lovingly nurture that part of myself without capitulating to her demands. And so that was the beginning of cleaning up that part of my life and creating a loving, nurturing adult. I think for so many of us who have been abused as children, we think, God, I don't want to be a grown-up. I don't want to act like that. I don't want to join that tribe. Forget it. And we never take up our power and our magnificence as adults.
That's right. Yeah, I know that to be true in my own work with how loaded the word adult is for people.
Yes.
So, what does it mean? Because people will spend a tremendous amount of energy avoiding it.
Absolutely.
You know, and then when you begin to ask, well, what do you think a grown-up is? You know, they'll say, well, they live to pay their bills, and they never enjoy life, and they're miserable, and they have to marry people they don't like,
And
it's
they
like
yell at you.
And they yell. There's like this list of
Maybe they
misery.
even hit you, or you know, they're
That's right.
dangerous. They're, you know, they can be dangerous.
That's right, dangerous, or I often hear also emotionally and spiritually dead. And so you'll have people just fight that process of, because it feels so black and white.
Yes.
You know, I'm either going to be sort of an acting out child, or I'm going to be emotionally, you know, dead.
Bereft, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that we are having to learn how to redefine that word, adult, and redefine power. You know, most people think about power, and they think about the IRS or someone who has power over you.
That's right.
And instead, to begin to think about power as power is your ability to create beauty in your life.
Yeah, and the base, you know, a lot of, you talk about visualization in here and meditation and the connection between intention, which is how I see my life being, you know, and how important it is to have that picture.
Yes.
Because without a picture, then you're just sort of, the impression I have is that sort of drifting along, and you kind of find yourself in whatever pothole life takes you.
I think that's true, especially if you're not willing to do your act of power, if you aren't willing to do the footwork to live your dream. And one suggestion I would just make to people too is to begin to just sit in silence each day for 20 minutes beyond the difficulties of any given day. And that builds what we call a sacred witness, that place of radiance in your own spirit. And that really is the only thing that you take with you when you leave this dimension. So it's very wonderful to build.
Well, and you talked in the book about your struggle with that, and I know we're going to need to close here in a minute, but that whole idea, we've done a show on meditation and lifestyle, and we've talked about that in other capacities, and how hard that can be to be just with you.
Just with that. And I would encourage people to move beyond that chatter into some place of stillness, that emptiness that's so full.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for writing this book. I think it's going to be incredibly helpful for women. I know it isn't just written for women, but as a woman, it really resonates
Thank
for
you
me.
for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. We are closing our second full season at Bay Area Psychology. Those of you who have been with us, I want to thank you for tuning in. Stay with us next season. We're going to return to offer more exposure, different topics, lots of other brilliant specialists. Please join us in January. I'm Mary Crocker Cook. Good night.